you ever found one of those boxes and you go, what's this? Well, I was at my friend's house the other day and I came across this box that said mountain blocks on it. And interestingly enough, I had been working on mountain blocks. So I asked her, what's this? And she says, oh, somebody gave that to me and it wasn't going together right for them. So they gave it to me, thought that she could fix it. So I said, okay, give it to me. I will take it. I will fix it. And I will put it together. So this went together actually really fast once I figured out what they had done wrong and put it together. So that's what we're going to explore today is mountain blocks. Welcome to Quilt Crafters Corner. I'm Roberta and I am passionate about finding interesting, unique things that we can add into our quilts. So stick around to the end because I have 3 variations on this mountain block that you might want to try. So in doing this, actually I came across this from Kat in Covered in Love. It's a 501c that we donate a lot of quilts to. And she gives quilts to people that are in the hospital that are dying. And she doesn't really give it to the person, she gives it to the family for comfort while they're there with their loved one. It's a great 501c corporation and I will put a link in the description. So let's go over to the cutting table because I'm really excited about this block because there's so many possibilities and I want to let you in on some of those secrets. Okay, so here we are at the cutting table and this is really a simple block to do. This starts with 2 13-inch squares. And I have a dark one and a light one. Now these were 2 fabrics that I had just finished up using for backs. That's why they were at the top of my pile and they were big enough. I went, okay, let's use these up. So the first thing I do is make sure that they're 13 inches. Now Kat says 13.5, but I'm pretty accurate with my seams so I can get away with 13 and I don't waste too much fabric. So what I've done is I've drawn a line from point to point and then I've sewed a 1/4 inch off of each one of those points. So I've got a seam on this side, I got a seam on that side. So now I'm going to cut this in half and I have 2 blocks now. And now as you can see, they are pretty good size. But they do need to be trimmed up because they are a little bit bigger than 12.5. So I do trim them up. So once I'll take this to ironing board, I'll lay that flat, iron that down, and then I will cut this up. Now here are 2 blocks that have already been trimmed. These are already trimmed to 12.5. Now the secret to this block is the way that you lay them out. Now you've got a diagonal going this way and you have a diagonal going that way. You want your diagonals in opposite directions in order for this to come out the way it needs to come out. So let me show you how this works. So this is, like I said, real simple. This is a 12.5-inch block now. So what we're doing is we're just cutting 2.5-inch strips. Now I am not lining up with my mat, I am lining up with the ruler. In fact, let me move this a little bit more. I want my ruler to be the guide. So I'm lining it up at 2.5 and I'm going to make a cut. And I'm going to slide this just a little bit this way. Once again, I'm going to make another cut at 2.5. Now the other thing about this, you don't have to use 12.5-inch blocks. If you saw the one that was on the wall, that I believe was 8.5-inch blocks. And what they had done wrong is they did not make a right block and a left block. They made 2 right blocks. So that's why they were not getting those correct pieces in order for the mountain blocks to go together. So once I figured out what they had done wrong, it was real easy for me to correct the situation. Okay, so now we have our pieces and we're all cut. So now this is just super simple just take your top one and it goes in one direction. Then take your next one and that's just right next to it. And then there's that one. Okay, so there's one side. Now this one, we're just going to reverse the order of them. And as you can see, and there are your mountain blocks. And actually these should be on this side. There we go. That's better. Now we can see our mountain blocks much better. Okay, so there they are. And now this is just a matter of taking these strips over to the sewing machine and sewing them back together. Now this is going to end up to be 12.5 by 10.5. By the time you make all these seams, you're going to lose that 2 inches. So now this is going to be, it's going to shrink just a little bit, but your length is going to stay the same. So that's all there really is to making this block. But wait, I started looking at this going, well, what can I do to kind of give this a little bit more interest in it? So let me pick these up and let me show you what I came up with. Now I'll sew those together later. So once again, I was playing with adding some accents to it. Now look at how clever this is. This is just really simple to do, and look what it does. It gives it just that little pop. And now I just was, you know, whatever was at the top of the pile kind of went in here, and this was just kind of experimenting. So this is really simple to do. So let me show you how to do this addition to mountain blocks. So here is, now the reason why I chose this fabric, because it wasn't quite 13 inches, but I did want to use it. So I went, okay, well, I'll just add that strip, which will make it bigger, and it'll make it 13 inches. So now I just added an 1.5 inch strip that I'm going to sew here, and then flip it over and sew there. So let me go do that, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so there's one side on. Now I'm just going to kind of line this up in the same fashion as I did the other one. Now be careful, because this is a bias here, and so you're going to get a little bit of stretch. Try not to stretch it. And what I do is, see how I've got this kind of even here? I want to make sure that those are really close to being pretty even, because yes, granted, is this going to be a bigger square now? Yes, and I'm going to be able to trim it up, but even still, you kind of want it a little even. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to sew this seam now. Okay, so here's my square, and now as you can see, it is definitely bigger than 13 inches. I have made this a bigger square. So now what I want to do is I want to square this up to 12.5. Now, if you don't have a 12.5 inch ruler, you can do it here on the cutting table just by making sure you've got your 45-degree angle so that you get your points, because that's the really important part. And then you can trim this up. If you don't have a 12.5 inch ruler, which I'm trying to get mine out, there it is. I like the ones with the diagonals on it, so that way I can make sure that I center this right there along that strip that I put in. I get a nice diagonal line, and now I can just trim this up. It makes it real simple. I'll put a link in the description to a 12.5 inch ruler if you don't have one. They are quite handy, and they are nice to have, especially for squaring up blocks. They work really well. Now you want that diagonal only because we're going to be centering this block. We're going to be centering this block so that I can sew that top layer on, your contrasting layer. Okay, there we go. Okay. So there is your bottom block. Now what I'll do is I'll put a top block right over this, and then I'll draw a line down my middle, and I'll sew on each side of it. This is too big. This is a 13, not a 12 and a half. That needed to be 13, not 12 and a half. I cut it too small. That's why it's not working out. It's supposed to be a 13, not a 12 and a half. So now, even still, take it and you're going to draw a line. Just make sure it's 13. Draw a line down that center point, and I just do it with a pencil. And now what I'll do is sew a 1/4 inch off of that line, back and up. And what that'll do is it will give me this element here. So that's how this goes. Make it a 13-inch block, not a 12 and a half. I cut that way too small. Okay, but I can still use it. I can still make this work, because I think this was, well, what was this? This was, yeah, a 10 and a half inch block. So on the length. So I could cut this down and make a duplicate to this one. So that's how you add this element here. Now wait, there's another thing that you can do to make this more interesting. So I basically did the same thing, but this time these are open. These are just a strip that I laid in there. So let me show you how to do that, because that's kind of fun. The idea here is to kind of fold this up, and when I go to quilt it, it gives it a 3D look. You kind of get that layer of, you know, I could just fold it up a little bit and kind of get that ripple effect in it. Now this is a real interesting idea that I've seen done in a lot of quilts, and I've always thought it was kind of an interesting thing. I just never tried it. So I thought, well, this is a perfect block to try this on and see what that looks like. And so I kind of like this effect. So let me show you how to do that. So I have my 13-inch blocks here, right? Yep, 13-inch blocks. So the first thing that I do here is I take my white pencil and I just draw a line down this center from point to point. All right, so now I have a line to follow. And what I'll do is I'll just place with the seam will be here, so I want the fold out here. And the same thing with this one. I want the seam in the center, and I'll just line that up. Now, you could easily cut this, pin these in and pin that on, and it kind of makes it for a long, complicated thing. Or you can just get your glue stick out, which I've done, and just I put glue right down that center line. Just put some glue right down that center line. Okay, so now all I need to do is lay my strips down right on that center line and just kind of press it into the glue. And this is going to hold it really nicely for you to go over to the machine and sew this. And then the same with the other side. Just press that right into that glue. And this is just a simple way to add this element to your blocks. Now I'm going to cover with the top one. Draw my line. I'm going to draw my line so that I have a line to go down and follow. So there's my line that I'm going to follow, and just place this right there on top and just kind of line up my corners and everything lines up. Now I know if I go down each side 1/4 inch off of that, I'm going to catch this little strip of fabric. And then what that's going to give me is it's going to give me that element right there. It's going to give me that little strip of fabric that gives it that extra look. So that's the second way that you can make these blocks really interesting. Now the third way is using up your scraps. And I just was stunned when I pulled out, I have a bunch of 12.5-inch solid blocks. And they're just, that's all they are, is they're just what I call crumb squares, or just a log cabin. This is almost like a log cabin, and it's a real simple, easy block to make, and just put it together. And then when you do this to it, it kind of almost gives you that Art Deco look. It gives you that little bit of interesting looks. So I've got a couple of these that I've been working on. And this one I've sewn, so let me cut it apart and show you. And see, it's just, once again, it's just a 13-inch block, and then I've sewn from, you know, diagonal, on the diagonal, and there's my blocks. And all I need to do now is iron press it, of course, but then just lay them so that the diagonals are opposite each other. You got one going one way and one going the other way, so that your blocks come out correctly. Now what I want to do is I want to also do this one, but interchange them, because you get a right block and a left block when you cut these apart. And I want to interchange this right block and left block with these, and kind of get an even more interesting look. So that's another thing that you can do to make these blocks super interesting and use up those scraps that you have. It doesn't have to be solids. It can be your scraps. It can be anything that you have you want to use up. It's a real interesting way to use up some of those scraps. Now, I've just given you 3 really good ways to use up some of your scraps with one simple design. And I'm constantly curious about unique and original ideas that I can come up with, and how can I create them with just using up my scrap fabric. This is a lot like Jackson Pollock, splattering paint at a canvas and coming up with something interesting and unique. And just like no one else could be Jackson Pollock, no one else can create your unique designs. As you explore these scrap techniques, you discover things. Maybe you love those wonky angles, or maybe it's a certain color combination. Each discovery becomes part of your creative DNA. You know what I mean? That playful exploration with scraps. It's actually growing your confidence and expanding your artistic voice. Before you know it, you're bringing that same fearless creativity to your beautiful fabrics. If you're craving new, unusual, and original ideas for your scraps, come join me. I have some workshops coming up, starting with a free one on how to use up those scraps. So I hope I've inspired you to give this block a try. There are so many ideas and so many possibilities you could do with the fabrics that you have already, the scraps that you have already, or even some of those fabrics you've been holding on to for a long time that you don't know what to do with. These are all done in Asian prints, and when I saw it, I just went, oh, I've got to put this together. So I hope you enjoyed that. Please like and subscribe. It really does help me out, and I do appreciate it. Leave me a comment. Are you going to try this? And don't forget, Kat in Covered in Love in Texas would like to have your blocks. I'll put a link in the description for her also. So until next time, happy quilting.